Which one are you passing around? Which one are you passing around?
Shut the door here. I know. You can choose coolness or quiet, I guess. We probably can't have both. All right, well, welcome everyone. This is the subcommittee for House File 571, the Medical Ethics Defense Act. This is a bill that passed out of the House last year. It passed through Judiciary Committee here in the Senate. Did not come to the floor for a vote. And what we're taking up today, we did sub out the original language, which was a Senate file, and we are taking the House language that, as I said, passed through the full House last year. Um, I'm Senator Jeff Taylor. I'll be chairing the meeting today. We also have Senator Blake and Senator Green with us. Would either of my colleagues, Senator Green, Senator Blake, we're going to reserve our comments for the end of the session. We've got 60 minutes for this subcommittee. We're hoping that that will give ample time for everyone to express an opinion, whether you're in the room or online. I'm going to first go around the room and get comments from those who are sitting or standing here, and then we will go to the online folks. And if you are online and you'd like to participate by speaking, I would just ask that you raise your yellow electronic hand, and we will eventually get to you. Given the number of people who are interested in this bill and want to say something, we're going to start off at least by limiting your comments to 2 minutes. And at that point, I will thank you, and then we will move on to the next person. If you want to speak less than 2 minutes, um, all the better if you're able to be more succinct. But we want to get as many people as possible an opportunity to speak. So I'm going to start over here in this corner, and we will go this way around the room.
Jay Yates, Blank Children's Hospital. We're registered undecided. We're just concerned about any unintended consequences that may occur from this bill moving forward.
Well, Peter Herr the Iowa Federation AFL-CIO, Iowa Federation of Labor AFL-CIO. We're representing the interest of SEIU Healthcare Iowa. SEIU represents 5,000 healthcare workers in Iowa and 50,000 healthcare workers in Minnesota. We're concerned, like we understand that the freedom of religion is important. However, it does not include the right to harm others. This bill could harm patients in Iowa. The bill does not require those objecting provide any advance notice. It prevents institutions and supervisors from taking actions to ensure that patients are not harmed when these refusals occur. And they could be assigning different employees to different roles and shifts. This bill would only further potential delays for medical care. It also does not include patient protections. An employee who refuses to treat someone does not have to ensure that the patient has comprehensive information about their health status, diagnosis, or prognosis. They can refuse or provide referral and fail to ensure patients get needed care elsewhere. It would allow nearly any employee at an insurance company to refuse or complete insurance billing documentation for a service they disagree with. We do have some ways to improve the bill, require referral so a patient can receive timely services, do not include administrative staff in the process, and do not include insurers. And I'll send the full length of my notes to the committee members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seth Brown on behalf of the Iowa Medical Society. We represent Iowa's physicians across the state. We're undecided on the bill. Generally speaking, we're supportive of measures that would promote professional and moral autonomy for physicians. With that being said, we do have some concerns, and this bill does put us in a bit of a difficult position because we do see ourselves as a patient advocate, and we have some concerns that there will be hindrances to patient access under this bill with how broadly it's written currently. As mentioned, with a lack of referral or not applying to specified services as we currently do, for example, under abortion procedures, we see that broad language could be problematic down the road and have unintended consequences. Thank you.
Brandon Guy with Walmart Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're just monitoring the bill.
Members of the subcommittee, my name is Greg Chaplin. I'm senior counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom. We routinely review legislation for its effect on constitutional rights, and we represent professionals, including healthcare professionals who have had their conscience rights violated because of their inability to perform particular procedures that might violate their conscience. This includes clients like Dr. Alan Josephson, who spent decades as a psychiatrist and leader of his division and his university when he was terminated merely because he expressed concerns about gender transition procedures on minors. People like Kathy DiCarlo, who was a nurse, who let people know about her objection to doing abortion procedures, but was threatened with termination of her livelihood if she did not participate. And unfortunately, she did end up participating in an abortion of a 5-month-old. These are just a few stories of our clients that highlight the growing problem with healthcare professionals being forced to either choose between their conscience or their career. That not only does a disservice to the healthcare professionals in the state, but also to all the families in their communities. This is also a growing problem with a shortage of healthcare professionals. 9 other states already protect healthcare professionals' rights of conscience. And with those 9 states, you can only imagine that people would like to go to those states to exercise their profession with their conscience intact. Some states like Florida, South Carolina, Ohio, and Tennessee, among others, have had this in place for years now, and it works as intended. It's carefully tailored, that it applies to particular procedures. There's nothing about the patient, their lifestyle choices, or the characteristics that can be the basis for a conscious objection. There has to be something about the procedure itself that raises that conscious objection. So I would say it's well tailored, it's good for the doctors here, it's good for the patients, and it's good for the practice of medicine in general. Available for questions as well. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tim Millay. I'm a recently retired surgeon from Davenport, native Iowan who left the state a long time ago for my education and my training. And in 1992 was happy to return to Iowa. And the primary reason is the people that I would be taking care of and trying to help, because Iowans are respectful, they're common sense people. And which I think this bill represents those traits quite well. Because as Mr. Chapin discussed, in many areas of the country, there's too many instances where someone in healthcare is told, well, you do what we say and not what you think is best for your patient, or lose your job. And in this epidemic of burnout that we hear among medical professionals, physicians, nurses, et cetera, definition of burnout really is a moral injury. And being told to do what you think is not best for your patient is a moral injury. So that epidemic, a bill like this can have an impact on that. And finally, if we don't protect the rights of those who care for us to follow their conscience, to follow their principles, and do no harm, to really do what they think is best for the patient in front of them, we will all benefit. It will attract more professionals to the state that we don't have now. We're losing medical students to other states that do have these conscience rights protections. And I think that this is important if we're going to, I don't have a finger in the pie anymore because I'm retired, but I have children and grandchildren, and everyone wants to leave wherever they've been a better place. And this is my primary motivation for doing this. So thank you very much.
Sarah Vanderplu, Iowa Department of Inspections, Appeals, and Licensing, and we're just monitoring.
Andy Conlon on behalf of Do No Harm. We're an organization, national organization of predominantly medical and medical professionals who have had to make the choice of conscience over career. In the interest of time, I'll say that we strongly echo the comments from our friends from ADF that we heard several moments ago. We support the bill and would be happy to answer any questions.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Karen Olison. I'm an OBGYN physician in Des Moines. I ask you to please vote no on this bill. This bill would only further exacerbate delayed medical care throughout Iowa. There are no protections for patients if there's an objection by a provider or an entire institution, including those patients who are in need of urgent care. Especially for those in small towns or rural areas in Iowa, this bill could mean that they cannot get the care they need in a timely fashion, which could cause long-term irreversible harm to those seeking care. As an OBGYN in Iowa, we are already facing the worst OBGYN provider per capita rate in the nation. Hospitals across the state are shuttering their obstetrical units. As Iowans have to travel further for care, they need to be assured that they can get the care they need in a facility when they arrive. This bill is extremely broad and reaches all types of patients seeking medical care. It applies to all healthcare entities, whether they are not religiously affiliated. For example, a pregnant woman can be denied life-saving treatment for cancer because a physician objects to providing treatment that could harm her pregnancy. An individual who is transgender could be refused urgent medical care because an employee objects to their identity. Providers could even decline to care for patients against whom they have personal objection to, like a child of a gay or interracial couple, young adults who are engaging in premarital sex, or a sex worker who has been the victim of physical abuse. This bill is a discrimination in healthcare. It is a slippery slope for eliminating healthcare of marginalized people. I ask you, please vote no. Thank you.
Lance Kinzer, First Amendment Partnership, we're registered in favor. And I would just say, while House File 571 has numerous provisions, its core insight is a natural extension of a well-established principle in Iowa law, that it's inconsistent with core societal values and well-recognized principles of medical ethics to compel anyone to perform medical procedures that violate their sincerely held religious or ethical beliefs. Iowa has long recognized this principle with respect to abortion, but as medicine moves into new and ever more ethically challenging areas, such as transgender-related treatments and procedures, there's a concomitant need for laws protecting medical conscience to keep pace. I want to be clear, House File 571 does not allow denial of services based upon who a person is or who their parents are. It merely shields medical professionals from adverse action for conscience-based decisions to refrain from participating in a particular type of treatment or procedure that has to be unrelated to the status or identity of who they're serving. In doing so, this bill simply extends a principle already long established in Iowa law. The last point I want to make is that the access to care issue is actually the opposite, I would say, of what we've heard from some who've come before. Protecting competent providers from being driven out of the profession simply because they're ethically unable to perform a particular non-emergency medical treatment or procedure will ultimately mean more doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals available to perform the vast bulk of medical needs in Iowa. It's those who would seek to compel healthcare workers to choose between their consciences and their careers who pose the real threat to access to care in Iowa.
Hi, my name is Ryan Ben. I'm with the Family Leader, and we are in support of the bill as well. We believe it's important to protect healthcare professionals from being forced to perform a procedure that violates their conscience. A nurse shouldn't be fired for refusing to do what she believes is wrong. It's important to remember that all medical treatments have potential benefits and potential negatives, and that might be different for the individual receiving the treatment. That's why there's almost always an ethical and moral calculation to be made when a treatment is provided. Treatments can help and they can also hurt. And the medical consensus about whether some treatments are helpful or harmful often changes over time. So doctors should be free to operate in good conscience, free to evaluate whether a treatment is good or bad, because this is consistent with the physician's obligation to do no harm. We're in agreement, and the way I read this bill as an attorney, there's no, a doctor would not be able to say, I don't like the identity of this person, so I'm not treating you. It has to be tied to a specific procedure. So I don't think that should be a concern for the subcommittee. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Tom Chapman. I'm with the Iowa Catholic Conference, and we support the bill. We believe that the right of conscience is a fundamental right for human beings. I do want to share with you a letter that I've been authorized to share from Dr. Loris Kaljan, who's the Director of Bioethics at the Carver School of Medicine at the University of Iowa. He's in support of the bill. These opinions are his alone and not the university's, but I'm just going to share a couple points from a lengthy letter. In healthcare, these disagreements are about when human life begins, whether it's ever right to intentionally end a human life, how we determine a patient is dead, whether a person's gender is rooted in biological sex or personal feelings, and even about what health is. Freedom of conscience in healthcare is not about who we care for, but about which healthcare practices are ethical. The right of conscience protects the right to avoid certain kinds of morally controversial practices. It does not allow professionals to avoid caring for certain categories of people. The right of conscience protects an individual's right to not participate in morally controversial actions. It does not give an individual the right to do things that violate an institution's moral standards or undermine its mission. So thanks for your consideration today. We support the bill.
My name is Dane Schumann. I represent the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. We're registered opposed to the bill. What I've heard so far is some concerns about gender-affirming care or abortion procedures. There is, of course, as you've heard, pre-existing conscious protection for abortion care. If it's about gender-affirming care, we feel like we can probably take care of that on some level and be more specific with this bill. But as it's written, it is very broad. And I do think that because of its breadth, we've heard some concerns already about the lack of any duty for people to refer patients. We do think that that's going to present some access to care issues that give us grave concerns. The other concern I would just raise is, we've heard some about litigation that would arise from this bill, and I do think it presents the opportunity for there to be pretty frivolous litigation that's brought maybe against hospitals, although they have an exemption here to be able to exercise their own conscience in ways that they regard as fit, but perhaps against smaller institutions and smaller practices where someone can manufacture an excuse for why they were terminated because they've got a religious belief that they now hold that they may not have held when they were hired. And so, in that sense, this bill presents a pretty stark distinction between, typical employment discrimination claims like ADA claims or civil rights claims where someone has an indelible characteristic from when they start that you know about. But in this case, someone can develop a belief that they now hold that they may not have held before and use that as a cover for why they got fired. And then at that point, they can go in and avail themselves of the attorney fee provision in this bill, which creates a very large incentive for someone to settle what's probably a pretty frivolous claim. So we think that there may be some legitimate things to extend some protections to with respect to conscience, but with the bill this broad, we are worried that there are going to be quite a few unintended consequences with it, two of which I've outlined. So, thank you.
Jeff Pitts with the Iowa Faith and Freedom Coalition. Ethical integrity is the cornerstone of the medical profession. Forcing practitioners to perform actions that violate their deeply held moral or clinical convictions undermine the very nature of healthcare. I've heard it said before, and it bears repeating, no medical practitioner should be forced to choose between having their career and having a clean conscience. Bullying doctors and nurses into doing what they think is not the best, that's not the best course of action. Please pass the bill.
So, hi, it was so much for a seat at the table, right? So I just have to stand. So my name is Lori Hunt. I live here in Des Moines, Iowa. So 25 years ago, I was down here a lot. I helped pass a bill that would ensure that contraception is covered. Oh, is it little? Oh, got it. Okay. So to ensure that contraception is covered by health insurance. And we are sliding so far back from making these gains, making care affordable and accessible to all. And I think that's what you need to look at this bill, is how does this help people get health care? How does like not knowing if your pharmacist is going to fulfill, you know, a prescription for something without knowing that before you drive an hour to the pharmacy in the state and drive an hour back? How does that help people that need emergency care? You know, is there a list of restrictions like outside the ER or something like that? You know, that we're not going to do these things. So if you do, you're going to have to drive across town to go to Broadlawns or something like that. So I'm asking you to kind of consider it. I know it seems there are some good things that kind of feel good about it, but I think you need to think about the people that will be affected by it. So please oppose the bill.
Kirsten Delagardelle, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Iowa. I wasn't necessarily planning to speak on the bill today. However, I would say that we are opposed to this bill, and many have said that this bill would not discriminate based on who the patient is or who the parents were. But as we often know, the types of medical care that people seek are a direct result of either the choices they're making in their lives for their health. That's what my doctor tells me all the time, right? It's based on my choices that I'm making, or they can be predetermined factors. And so there are certain treatments, you know, by and large, women, people with ovaries are the ones that use birth control. And so there can be discrimination that can be linked to those characteristics based on the medical treatment that people are seeking. I know that other folks have said that's not what the bill would do, but in fact, these medical treatments and treatment for these things are often linked with sex and gender and other lifestyle characteristics. And so we're saying that's not what it would do, but medical care is by and large individualized to the person, and each of us have different characteristics, and sometimes those are related to protected classes. So I would just point that out as you're considering this bill. Thank you.
Hi, Damian Thompson, representing Iowa Safe Schools. We're registered in opposition to the legislation. In 2024, Iowa enacted a Religious Freedom Restoration Act. That law already provides protections for religious conscience and does apply to healthcare providers and institutions. RFRA requires courts to balance religious freedom with compelling state interests like patient safety and access to care. Because of that, this piece of legislation is unnecessary. More importantly, this bill goes far beyond RFRA and moves the balance I mentioned entirely. The proposed legislation extends conscience protections to not only individual medical practitioners, but to healthcare institutions and payers, terms defined so broadly that they include hospital systems, insurance companies, and corporate entities. Conscience protections have traditionally been intended to safeguard individual belief, not to grant system-wide exemptions to powerful organizations making coverage and access decisions for thousands of Iowans. Proponents of the bill claim to regulate procedures, not people. But under its own definitions, healthcare services include the core functions of medical care: counseling, referrals, records, and advice. When those services can be denied based on conscience, the law authorizes denial of care to entire categories of patients whose medical needs are predictable and identity linked. That is impact-based discrimination, regardless of intent. There's also no requirement to ensure continuity of care, no obligation to refer patients elsewhere, and no mechanism to evaluate the impact of those refusals on patients. House File 571 then grants sweeping immunity, shielding practitioners, institutions, and payers from civil, criminal, and administrative liability for the exercise of conscience. That level of blanket immunity does not exist under RFRA and significantly weakens oversight and accountability within the healthcare system. The bill further limits the ability of professional licensing boards to enforce standards of care, even when speech or conduct is misleading or harmful, unless an extremely high evidentiary threshold is met. Thank you.
Good morning, Senators. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director and Lobbyist for Interfaith Alliance of Iowa and Action Fund, and we are registered strongly opposed to this legislation on three main points. One is the ethical, moral, or religious beliefs. So going far beyond religious freedom, going into the areas of moral and ethical, including for institutions and payers. And so you have payers that can add language to their website on ethical or moral principles and not pay for people's care. And their primary, as I heard from a friend, their primary goal of an institution, of a payer institution, is to make money, right? And to be able to make sure that they have money in their coffers. And so will they make decisions based on that and put it under the guise of moral or ethics? So very concerned about that language. The second piece is patients' rights. This bill undermines patients' rights. There is no requirement for referrals. The only exception is for emergencies. And so it is undermining patients' rights and their ability to receive care and access to care. And the third piece is a little section on page 3 that's tucked into the bill that is allows for employment discrimination. That is gravely concerning because it is based specifically on religious beliefs. And so you can have an institution, whether it's the payer, whether it's the institution, they can not hire somebody simply based on religious beliefs. It could be somebody who's just sitting behind a desk and moving paperwork, but they could still discriminate against them and not hire them based on a difference in religious beliefs. And so we're very much opposed to this legislation.
Thank you. My name is Bob Hoffman. I'm with the Iowa Atheists and Free Thinkers, and we are opposed to the bill. I have a very personal reason for being opposed to the bill. I've been married for 45 years. That marriage would have ended in 1984 if this bill were law. My wife had placenta previa 4.5 months into her pregnancy. She had to go into the emergency room. Her physician said he couldn't do her procedure that she needed to have done or die. And the institution at the time was a religious institution, but they referred her to another doctor who could actually do the procedure, and they allowed the procedure to be done. So that's my personal reason for being opposed to this bill.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Arya Shipston, and I'm a constituent in Des Moines. Thank you for hearing me today. I urge that you oppose Senate File 220. I want to tell you about my husband, Liam. Liam is a transgender man. He started transitioning about 16 years ago socially, medically, the whole 9 yards. His access to testosterone saved his life. Before he transitioned, he was actively depressed and suicidal. He still has the scars to prove it. Having access to this care gave him the support and recognition he needed to turn his life around. Now he's a lively, brilliant man finishing his electrical apprenticeship. This is his number one fear. This bill, right here. He is terrified at the possibility of losing access to his care because it saved his life. He has already had to change doctors before due to lack of education of this care, and this creates real opportunity to lock him out of this care entirely because doctors may oppose his existence and the treatment therein. This bill gives the entire Iowa healthcare system license to discriminate against folks who don't live their version of reality. The understanding of patients is that they go to a healthcare provider, they are treated by a physician, and then covered by insurance for their care. That has been the standard process for as long as I have been alive, and I can't for the life of me think of a good reason why we are trying to complicate that relationship and adding fear into the equation. Thank you for your time. I urge you to vote no on Senate File 220.
Keenan Crow, One Iowa, we are opposed to this legislation. I'll split my comments into two brief subsections here. First, there are already federal rules in place on this. If you read the final 2024 HHS rule on the rights of conscience, a substantial portion of this bill is already covered. That rule combines guidance regarding a number of different pieces of federal legislation, including the Church Amendments, the Code Snow Amendment, the Weldon Amendment, certain provisions of the ACA, certain provisions of the Medicare and Medicaid statutes, and the Consolidated Appropriations Act, among several other federal laws. Second, my main objection to this bill is that it treats certain groups of industries and professionals as somehow more deserving of moral consideration than others. Let me give you a scenario to demonstrate this. If there is a physician or an insurer that is a strict ethical vegan and objects to paying for or treating a patient with slaughtered animal-derived products like heparin, for instance, they would be allowed to deny those under this legislation. If, however, a nutritionist or a food service worker had the exact same moral objection, well, tough luck. Under this bill, they aren't in the favored group and their conscience beliefs don't matter. Look, I understand that these are tough areas of law, I really do, but I believe that we need to remain firmly committed to the principle that law should either apply to everybody or to nobody. We shouldn't be creating special conscience rules for certain professions when the rest of us don't have them. There is no moral or ethical justification for differentiating between the moral beliefs of the dietitian and the moral beliefs of the nutritionist, but unfortunately that's exactly what this bill does. One of these receives protections, the other one does not. So because of that, we'd ask you to vote no on this legislation and allow existing rules and regulations that apply to all Iowans govern this area of law. Thank you.
Jacob Schrader with Delta Dental of Iowa. We're just monitoring the legislation.
Nick Laning representing the Occupational Therapy Association. Our folks have some major concerns with this legislation, largely on areas you've already heard, but on the broad definitions and the broad descriptions in the legislation. They think it could limit access to care, especially in rural areas for high demand care where we have shortage of providers in the state. And really, if you have the ability to you don't have the ability to refer, where then do those folks in rural areas go to get that care is the concern of the Occupational Therapy Association. Thank you.
Heaven Chamberlain of Bitches Get Stuff Done. We are registered in opposition to this bill for multiple reasons. The first one being, pregnant people are dying in Texas because of laws against abortion. They have to sit in the parking lot until they are banging on death's door in order to receive an abortion. This will make Iowa the same. I would like to speak on a personal note. Last Wednesday, I had my uterus out. I cannot get pregnant anymore, thank God, because I fear we live in the Handmaid's Tale. And here's something they did not do. They did not take my ovaries because of an ethical objection due to the fact that it would send me into early menopause at the age of 30. There's a difference between morality and ethicalism, and this blurs the lines. And comparing us to Florida and Tennessee as we race to the bottom in OBGYN care across rural Iowa is despicable. We're already on a race to the bottom in water quality and everything else. Why can't we focus on something more important like the $1 billion deficit?
Chuck Hurley, family leader, just want to emphasize that the parade of horribles that we've heard from a few of the witnesses today are speculative. The 9 states that have passed this have not experienced them. Also, I'm hoping that we'll hear online from some medical students who were here live last year to testify at the subcommittee on this same bill. And medical students are considering leaving the profession or not going into the profession in the first place and matriculating to the medical schools because of the concerns that they have that when they raise their ethical objections to certain things, they will be discriminated against. So it is happening here in Iowa. And I would say to those who think that this is somehow unfair, it isn't all inclusive of everybody's ethics. Let's have more protection for ethical objections rather than fewer. This is a step that needs to be taken. And if there's other professions that are having the same problems as the medical profession is in this arena, bring forward your concerns to the legislature, and we'll try to expand rather than constrict the protection for ethical concerns. Thanks for bringing the bill. We strongly support it.
Hi, my name is Heather Ryan. I'm with the organization Bitches Get Stuff Done. We are opposed to this bill, and there's very little that I can say about why this bill is horrible that hasn't already been said. But since you do plan to pass this bill through subcommittee, I would like to propose that perhaps we can change it to Make Iowa Gilead Again as the title instead.
Has everyone in the room had a chance to speak who wanted to speak? I think we've gone around, so we are going to go online. We've got 2 hands up at this point, and if there's anyone else online who would like to speak, now would be the time to raise your electronic hand. We will start with Joseph Heyman, I believe it is. Herman. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize. But Joseph, you can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Joe Hireman, third-year medical student at the University of Iowa, Carver College of Medicine, who is planning to go into family medicine and is strongly in favor of this bill. There are two concerns regarding healthcare conscience protections that I'd like to primarily address today. The first is the idea that protecting conscience reduces access to care. I believe misunderstands how a number of clinicians and future clinicians, such as myself, actually respond to coercion. For many of us, violating deeply held ethical beliefs is not even an option. The alternative is not compliance, but rather is leaving medicine, avoiding certain fields, or practicing in other states altogether. Second, systems that lack conscience protections, I believe, could exert a self-selecting pressure where they filter out clinicians with personal integrity and proportionally retain those who are willing to set aside their moral compass and act against it when pressured. And I believe that this isn't the kind of medical system patients want. In a recent survey by the USCCB in 2019, 83% of people, Americans, believe that medical professionals should not be forced to perform procedures that conflict with their principles. And so patients deserve physicians whose recommendations are guided by integrity and judgment and not by fear of retaliation. Conscious protections also do not belong to one particular political side. They protect liberal physicians, conservative, religious, secular physicians, all alike from being forced to violate their ethical judgment. Conscious protections are worldview neutral, and once you remove them, everyone becomes vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. April, you can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you for moving this bill forward. Montrose, Iowa supports this bill as it aims to protect providers from violating their rights of conscience in performing a medical service or providing a treatment. This bill also protects them from retaliation or discrimination based on their moral or religious convictions. Knowing that we have a workforce shortage in healthcare in Iowa, perhaps protecting fundamental freedoms such as conscious rights and free speech will encourage more to enter into the profession, especially as the healthcare company consolidation and expansion of government-funded healthcare continues to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, April. I'm not seeing any other hands up online, so we are going to come back to the table here, and I'm going to start with Senator Blake for your closing comments.
Yes. This bill, for a tremendous amount of the reasons that have already been stated here today, is a bad policy for Iowa. The restrictions that are placed based on conscience, morality, which is a subjective belief, will cause ripple effects upon patients here in Iowa that will have lasting impact that will harm Iowans. This comment that has been made that these have been played, that other states that have passed this have not seen any repercussions. I mean, there's an article here in Time Magazine that says that in Tennessee, a single mother was denied prenatal care because of her status, who she was. And so what happens if you have a doctor that says, well, you're 16 years old, you shouldn't be having sex, I'm not going to treat you. Go somewhere else. And you're in the middle of rural Iowa. Where are they going to get care? And you see, this is, and on top of that, you have potentially a mismatch within systems, within their own hospital systems, where this segment over here will treat things, these over here. How are you supposed to do a cohesive job as an organization to try to make policy that allows you to treat people of Iowa? But the part that I really struggle with, and Connie, wherever she is, she'll have to burst my bubble a little bit, is what is the ethical, moral structure of a corporation, of a business? I'm an attorney that deals in that front. It's meant to make a profit. It is meant to make money. it's meant to maintain shareholders. And I'm not saying that in a deriding way for what they do. That's what we've designed corporations and entities to do. What will stop them from putting in their bylaws saying, hey, we're not going to do cancer treatments above $1 million because it's against our conscience? What is going to stop them from saying that this is something we don't want to handle, I don't know, PBM reform, because we don't want to pay increased premiums to these groups because it hurts our market share. It's against our conscience. They have immunity. We can't even fight back if they start doing that. So why would you pass something that would really widen the corridor, not only for making sure that people can't have access, but open the door to potentially harming Iowans in ways that will reverberate far beyond just the procedures that we've talked here today? To me, this has the unintended consequences of this bill far outweigh any protections that are already in place for the federal level and different regulations. This is redundant in that sense. Why would we take steps to make it harder for Iowans to receive care? That's why I'm voting against this bill.
Thank you, Senator Blake. Senator Green, closing comments?
Sure. Last year we had another bill. Could you explain the differences between this bill and last year's?
I did not.
What's that?
I'm sorry. Was that a question?
Yeah, that
There's
was
a
a question.
single line of difference.
One line of difference.
Yeah.
So it's basically essentially the same.
Certainly. Okay, that's my only question. I'll sign off on that.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I also support this bill, not surprisingly, and I do first of all want to thank everyone who took the time and trouble to come here in person or to join us online, and whether you spoke or you're just listening. Thank you for participating in this process. And that's true whether you support the bill or you oppose it. We need to hear both sides. A lot of bills that we pass around here are unanimous or bipartisan, and that can be great, but at times we're going to disagree on things. I'm going to save most of my comments for the full committee or hopefully the floor, but I will just make a couple of responses in terms of the question of insurance companies, corporations, and things like that. Can they have a conscience? I have been thinking through that this past week as I've received a lot of emails. A lot of the criticism and opposition to this bill focused on that particular aspect. And as someone who personally do not believe that the U.S. Constitution protects corporations or defines them as persons, I had to think through that because even though legally at the federal and the state level, corporations are considered persons and hence can have consciences, I thought, well, what does that really mean? Why are we protecting pharmacists and nurses and physicians and other individual healthcare providers who are actual human beings, but then we're also roping in corporations? But reading through the language of the bill itself, it does make sense. First of all, an insurance company is not going to be able to put something in their bylaws that say it goes against our conscience to pay claims over $1 million. That is not going to be covered by the language of this bill. Conscience is defined very specifically as ethical, moral, or religious beliefs or principles, financial, self-serving financial preferences or beliefs are not going to count as conscience. And then in terms of the persons who are institutions, corporations, and other legal entities, conscience is also determined specifically by the entity's governing documents, including but not limited to published ethical, moral, or religious guidelines or directives, mission statements, constitutions, articles of incorporation, bylaws, policies, or regulations. So it's, and in addition, the language of the bill also says that these legal entities, these organizations, these companies must fulfill contractual obligations. So it's not as though they can decide after the fact, I'm not going to pay off on the policy that we have entered into. That's a contractual obligation and they will have to pay. So I really am not worried about that particular argument. I feel, and it was also brought up, that this is not just limited to the First Amendment right to freedom of religion. And as much as I believe in that, and as important as that is, there's a reason that that comes at the very beginning of the Bill of Rights. I actually think it's a plus rather than a minus that this is broader than just religious protection. This protects individuals and institutions, whether they have religious beliefs and principles or non-religious ethical and moral obligations. So this isn't something that's specific to protect Christians. This isn't something that is specific even to protect people who have scruples about religious beliefs and principles. It includes people who are atheists, agnostics, or people of any religion. So it's a very inclusive bill, and I look forward to continuing this conversation in the full Judiciary Committee. Again, I thank you everyone for coming, and that concludes our subcommittee this morning. Thank you.
Yes. Just wondering, is there anything that makes you think, does this